and welcome to another edition of the SpareTime Podcast, sponsored by ADR. Where we do this every episode and going to stretch them eventually. Our aim is, if you've watched this before, is to have people from the bowling world. Now, a lot of people that we have on as guests on the podcast are bowlers themselves, but there's not just bowlers involved with bowling because there's a lot of people behind the scenes. So today's guest is very typical of that, and we're very happy to have on Tom Clark, who is the PBA commissioner. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to talk to you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. Now, I have lots of questions because, I guess like yourself is right up my street. He's the bowler. I used to bowl, but now I don't anymore. So I have lots of things that I would ask you. But so first of all, I'm going to start off. There's a lot of people, certainly in the UK, won't know much about the structure of the PBA. Can you explain to us what the role of the PBA commissioner is?
Well, the PBA started in 1958, and it really was a group of the best bowlers saying, let's get together and let's bowl against each other for competition and entertainment purposes. The people will enjoy to watch the best in the world go at it against each other in this game. And so it's really still that. And my job is to amplify it as much as possible and get as many people to see it and as many people to want to be a part of it and as many people to go bowling and just to see what it's like. And so going from putting together the greatest bowlers in the world in the greatest events and then getting as many people to see them and activate as bowlers themselves, there's a million little points in between, and that's what I do. So, from having a television deal and trying to televise the finals of events to having a website to making sure we have the best players, making sure we have the best formats and conditions that bring out the best in those players, but also to make sure that there's an entertainment value so that not only bowlers want to watch or be a part of it, but people outside the game will want to watch and be a part of it. And then you try to look for all the growth areas along the way. One of them, for me, certainly has been international bowling because the PBA was almost only U.S. for most of its history. We had a couple of great international players like Mika from Finland and Amleto from Venezuela make their mark on the PBA tour, but not until, really over the last 15 years or so, and we started the World Series of Bowling, have we seen the Dom Barretts from England and be able to come over here and become a big part of the PBA story. And so that was one growth initiative right there, international play.
Yeah, I mean, here in the UK, we don't have something like the PBA. So when it comes to bowling, then we all look towards the US, and we all watch it on Bowl TV, etc. Because we don't really have an equivalent. Your job involves the promotion of the sport and TV deals, etc. Now, in the UK, if we want to watch the PBA, we have to use Bull TV, and I know in the US, then it's on the Fox network. We can't get access to that, unfortunately. Are there any plans to get the PBA televised on channels other than Bull TV outside of the US?
Yeah, we've had discussions through the years about licensing our rights to other networks or other groups internationally, and have had a little success, but really nothing, no model that we could follow easily to keep pushing forward there. YouTube has been a really big way for us to grow internationally, and you're able to watch pretty much every show there. Bowl TV and before it Flow Bowling and before it Extra Frame, that those streaming, you are able to watch the Fox shows on Bowl TV, correct?
Yeah, on the finals we can, yeah.
So you can see it. You can watch the entire event. You can watch the qualifying. In the U.S., you can't see the Fox shows on Bowl TV. It's blocked in the USA, but but outside of our coverage area, Fox gave us the right to put the finals on Bowl TV. So I'm really happy about that. At least you get to watch it. Or guys like Belmo's family can watch, when he makes a show in Australia. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to because, Fox is not there. When we were on ESPN had a little greater penetration internationally. But Fox has been this spectacular partner for us, and they don't have that right now. But I'm sure we'll get better reaching more people globally on television soon. I've always been a fan of the Weber Cup, and how they've put that on. I don't think there's going to be a Weber Cup this year. Hopefully that they're able to bring that back at some point. But that was one high level event that you were able to watch live there, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean we've actually been to the Weber Cup when it was in the UK before COVID. We went a couple of times, but yeah, but on Bowl TV there is an internet for the people watching. There is an international version of Bowl TV which we didn't know, and we found it by accident because we realised that we couldn't watch what we wanted to watch. And I was on one of the forums, and some guy in Germany said, "Oh well, try the international channel," and we can see much more on the international channel than we can on the normal Bowl TV channel.
Okay.
I mean, bowling in the US is such a popular sport compared to the UK because in the UK it's not really seen as a sport by many people. I think people consider 10-pin bowling more to be like a pastime or hobby that you'll do on a Sunday afternoon or whatever. What do you think is the fundamental difference between the US and the UK that makes bowling so popular over on the other side of the pond, and it hasn't really sort of caught on here in the UK?
Well, I think history is a big part of it, and the fact that it kind of originated the sport, the game of bowling didn't originate in the United States, but it kind of first became a community organized around the competitive side of the game over 100 years ago, and so it's in the DNA of the game here that people grew up thinking of it as a place where you went to bowl, a league where you keep score for real, and it wasn't just for fun or just recreation. And there's been a professional tour on television for 70 years now. It's getting up there. The years keep changing. I remember when I started with the PBA, it was the 50th anniversary, but now we're more like 68 or 9 now. So, and so that being part of it is why we're able to hold on to the competitive side of the game, which is the part you guys and I care about. But it's still a big struggle in the U.S. as well, because overwhelmingly people in the U.S. bowl for fun, once a year, as part of a party. The way kids are introduced to the game now is overwhelmingly, again, a birthday party. And so many bowling centers in the U.S. are built for recreational play only. There's still enough, though, that have league base and tournament bases as their core customers, and that's what you really need, is to convince people in the UK that a league would be a lot of fun and keep people coming back to the bowling center regularly. Like I like how you started this podcast saying that I'm no bowler, which I'm not compared to Chris Barnes and Norm Duke, but I do bowl, and I bowl Wednesday nights in a league nearby my home in Wisconsin. And in that league, we bowl for score, and all of the guys come together, and they're all my friends now, and we meet every Wednesday night. And my team wants to win, and so that's why we want to buy bowling balls, and we want to use those in league. And so you need to get that going, in any other country that wants to grow the sports side of bowling, and then people want to then bowl in special tournaments on the side. And I'm sure these things exist for you, but you have to grow them. The only way to grow them is to prove to the proprietors that this is a way to sustain your business, because, good or bad, bowling is a business. And so if the business doesn't work, bowling's not going to work. And I think league bowling is a great way to sustain a business, because, again, I have to go to that bowling center 30 times a year, every Wednesday night for 30 weeks in a row. And then it makes me go there to practice, and it makes me go there to even have dinner once in a while, watch a game on TV in the bar. And that's how an establishment becomes a home for customers. And you just need to grow that.
So do you find the owners of bowling centers in the US are open to having leagues and tournaments at their centers? Because here in the UK, we have a relatively small number of centers that are sanctioned for tournament play and for leagues. And it seems to me that a lot of bowling center owners are not really interested in that, in those type of activities. I think they can get their, they can make the money from the general public coming in and, using the amusement arcades and everything else you have in there. And in many cases, to me, it seems like they're not so interested in that. So, when Ben's in tournaments, we end up going backwards and forwards to the same centers around the country. Is that something you're finding also in the US?
Yes, I mean, you're just talking about the whole issue in the game, and how do we convert the people that are just coming into centers on that one-time party type of mentality into becoming regular bowlers and wanting to have their own equipment. And pretty much the numbers are growing more on that recreation side as opposed to the competitive bowling side. So it's the same problem. It's just bigger here, than there. But I'm trying. You asked a question to start about what was the specific, like how to get them, how to get people or how to get the proprietors. It was how to get the proprietors. Yeah. Well, again, I would bring it back to the regularity of the customers, and the fact that if you're part of the competitive game, it becomes part of you. And it's not just something you did one night. It's not just something that was a goof, and maybe you'll come back next year, or maybe you'll even come back next month, but you can't guarantee that money. But the guaranteed money is with the regulars, and the regulars are going to be coming back and back if you can make league play enjoyable and fun. And it always was. And the biggest reasons why it's that side of the game has gone down really isn't about bowling. It's really about the choices people have now, and the societal shifts, and how much time people have, and scheduling a 30-week league, for example, now sounds very difficult for people to do, whereas before it was the only thing you wanted to do. So you have to beat that stuff back by coming up with creative ways to have people be challenged in the sport, to get them to encourage their friends to take part, because the camaraderie ends up being just as important as the sport. But I really do think it's as simple as being able to schedule, knowing for a fact that this number of people are coming to your bowling center on a certain night. But there are many centers here, just like what you described, where they're centering almost completely on the recreation. It's a faster way to make money, and they can charge a little bit more to do that for those types of customers than you can for that regular bowler who's coming all the time. And so it's an uphill battle, but you just have to keep, from my perspective, you just have to keep educating people as to the virtues of competitive bowling. And I'm sure with Ben, it can shape your life. It can make you disciplined in certain areas. It gives you a focus. It gives you goals, and it gives you things to reach. And then it also gives you opportunities to earn an education. It gives you opportunities to travel and meet people. And so the more people that understand everything that comes along with being into bowling, not just going bowling, the more we'll have. And we just need to keep promoting that. And that's why I appreciate people like you that are trying to do so.
I think obviously you mentioned there how they can earn, an education from bowling. And that's something that I very quickly picked up when I bowled over in Vegas for the SYC was, you don't earn, like if I win a youth competition, I might win £100 for that. And it's like, yeah, it's 100 quid, but whatever. But then if you're bowling like an SYC or especially PBA junior, you're sort of earning $2, $3, $4, $5,000 scholarship, which is then all going to a good cause. Where I think for me, I mean, I've looked at going to US colleges and stuff like that, but it's so expensive. And what you've managed to do, where you're basically saying you're earning yourself a future, is so great for bowling, because not only are you going now you can have an education because you bowled well, but you've also gone, you keep bowling well, you'll get this education, and via that, they're going to keep bowling through college. And what we lack sort of all over the world, but what you nailed on and done really well, is things like the PBA Junior, where you're giving bowlers like Ernesto, who's one of my good friends, who's won PBA Junior and Junior Gold near enough in the same year. You're giving them the opportunity, Gillian Martin as well, to shine in the limelight on TV and get a feel for it. And once you get to that stage, or once you see, hey, look, someone my age done this, that's, it's going to be your focus. And I'm just curious how that came about being set up and how difficult that is to regulate.
Well, it's been great. I've been really proud of PBA Junior and the growth of it. And it really was able to come about because the company that bought the PBA, Bolero, which owns the most bowling centers in the U.S., gave us the time and opportunity and the staff to be able to do it, because we always wanted there to be in the U.S. we have baseball and we have Little League baseball, and so we always wanted there to be a Little League bowling, and PBA Junior becomes that, and that's fantastic. And now being able to associate with the pros and even have a TV show and a national championship, I mean, it's almost, and knowing that you can bowl these regular events as a kid, in the $100 would be great. Win $100 every week, and now your hobby is, or your sport of bowling is totally paid for, and you can use that money, even if it's only a percentage of what it costs to get a college education. It still helps, and the fact that you can do that in bowling is just really underrated. And when you look at the people, like Ernesto plays basketball, right? I mean, I talked to him at the event, and it was really cool. He's a really good basketball player, and I'm a big basketball fan. But you have to be tall to be good at basketball. If you want a college scholarship in the USA, you would basically have to start at being 6'5" and over. The number of professional basketball players that are under 6'4" is extremely small, and the number of people that are over 6'4" is extremely small. So, and bowling is this game that any size, anybody can play, and anybody can win scholarship money and scholarships and compete at a high level and compete for thousands of dollars on television. And I feel like it's still a secret, even here, because if parents are putting kids in these other sports thinking they're going to get a scholarship or be millionaires someday, the aspiration is there, but the likelihood is so small. Whereas with bowling, nothing can really stop you except for you. We have some hurdles. I mean, it's expensive. You have to have equipment, and you have to have access to be able to practice and pay. So there are things that make bowling more difficult than a sport like soccer or basketball. But the opportunities for more people and the chance for an Ernesto to earn money towards a scholarship in bowling are really better than in other sports. So hopefully we can keep bringing that across to people by being on national television with that message, and more younger people will take up the game.
Yeah. We sort of mentioned about how there's requirements, but obviously me wanting to go in the PBA myself, as I've read up on these quite a few times. And they're like, you need to cash at this, or you need to have a certain average over this. But I think what we've learned, and I mean, I've experienced it in sort of England and around here in my youth career, of some things, especially like you mentioned, football or basketball, your success is heavily determined by someone's opinion of you. Where I think the great thing about what you've done with bowling is, while there is the PBA league, which is great, and I'm going to get on that in a second, where you have that team aspect, which is, a lot of people love and it makes great TV viewing, but you also have the fact of you get to the PBA on merit, not on opinion. So everyone that bowls has earned their spot there, and it means as long as you can hit these thresholds that you need to hit to qualify yourself. I mean, you've seen it with like D1 Booker this season, Boog as well, who are people that are coming out of PTQs and, going to the show and winning. I mean, Dio Bernard as well. All these people who, if it was a fully team sport and it was based on people's opinions of you, these people would never make it anywhere near a TV show, perhaps, where because it's based on what you can do as an individual, there's really good storylines that come out of it.
You know what? That is a fantastic viewpoint that I'm going to start using myself, that I don't think I've ever really articulated as well. Like, the pins don't lie. It's about how many pins you knock over. It's not whether a coach thinks you're okay and that coach is coaching his son at your position, and then you lose your confidence, and now you're not even playing your sport anymore. And bowling, yeah, you can enter, and we give you a score sheet and give you the lane assignments, and now it's up to you. And that is a great thing about the game. So I'm glad you said that. I need to remember that.
Mm-hmm. And additionally, sort of, you mentioned that you yourself were a bowler, and I think your job itself is quite a niche sort of role. I'm curious. Obviously, I did my research before we got you on, and it said that you had a love of bowling and you studied journalism before. But I'm curious to at what point you decided that this could be a career that you can forge, and how it came apart.
Yeah, well, I always loved bowling as a kid, so it was always a sport that I followed and a sport that I watched every week when it was on, probably just like you. And I knew all the players, I knew everything about it. But I got into journalism, sports writing. I worked for the biggest newspaper in the country, USA Today, and the media doesn't really cover bowling. So I couldn't be a bowling writer and have a successful career. So I was covering football and basketball and golf and tennis, and so I would always try to beg the media to cover bowling as a sport, and I would try to tell them it would pay off, and they let me do a few things on my own about bowling when working for USA Today, and so I got really a little bit more involved with the industry and the way that things worked by by writing about it. And so that's where I met all the people. And then I would write opinions about how bowling could do better and be more like some other sports, which I also had great access to leaders of so many other sports and learned how they ran their businesses. And every time I would learn about another sport, I would try to, in my mind, translate it to bowling. So, because I really just want bowling to be a popular sport, Um, and so after I had started writing about bowling, then I was contacted by people in the bowling industry saying, maybe you should work in bowling and you could get a lot of these things accomplished that you're talking about. And so I kind of took a leap of faith and left a business that I was comfortable in, um, uh, journalism, and it wasn't just writing or editing that was my job in journalism. I was an editor, an executive editor, a managing editor of newspapers. So I've been involved in business and managing staffs and trying to grow a company and things like that, in addition to being a writer. And so I took that leap of faith and said, you know what, maybe I can work in the bowling industry and do a good job for it, to grow it from within. And then I didn't know a lot. I got my feet wet working for the United States Bowling Congress, which is big, and we have it's a $50 million business. There were 2 million members of the USBC and the governing body of the game. And I worked there for 3 years and learned more and more about the industry and about elements of what I do now that I didn't know. And then it was pretty clear at a certain point, and the PBA saw that it was pretty clear that I could do the things that were my strengths probably better for the PBA than the USBC. So I moved from the USBC to the PBA. And, I think that you asked me, how did I know? I think when you wake up in the morning and all you can think about is your job and how you're going to do a better job, and that doesn't scare you, that excites you, then you know that you're doing something you should be doing because you have a passion for it. And if there were any weaknesses in knowledge or education that I didn't know, learning about those things was not going to be a chore. It's going to be, I was going to enjoy it because I cared. So you kind of, it's a basic advice for anybody is if you care about what you do, you're going to do a better job and you're going to want to stick with it and figure everything out.
We were just talking about how bowling is different from some sports, based on your performance being on merit rather than anything else. But another difference and something that's quite unique to bowling is the access that fans and league bowlers etc. have to some of the top bowlers in the world. I mean, if this was soccer or football, the stars of the best in the world are not that accessible. But with bowling, they are. I mean, you can go along to a PBA event and they'll be there in the crowd. And I mean, we've had quite a few PBA players on here. I mean, we had Martin Larson on, we've had Verity Crawley, and these people are accessible. And that's quite unique in any sport, to get the people at the top level to be as accessible to everybody. Do you not think that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've always used it as a strength and a difference. And even if you just take the basic premise of our pro-ams, and our pro-am, we do a pro-am at every tournament that we do, every regional tournament, PBA 50 tour event, PBA national tour events. And that gives people that live in the city that we're traveling to a chance to bowl alongside our players, and they're going to get their pictures with them and get their autograph and best of all, get a tip or two from them and be able to bowl right there with them. And it's not very expensive. It's not like a PGA Tour Pro-Am where only the most successful business people are even getting a chance to play in them. And it's for regular people who bowl in leagues, and that's a great example. But then even on site, yes, of course, you're so close to the action. You can watch the rounds by standing 5 feet behind EJ Tackett and watch him bowl. And then when he's done, try to get his autograph. And those are really big strengths. Although you have to at least, from my position, take a look at other sports that have less accessibility, but maybe they're growing their heroes better than we are. Is that because they're less accessible? They seem like they're on a pedestal somewhere. They seem untouchable. They seem like they're in a different world and you're getting to watch them. And is the familiarity with our players one of the reasons that holds us back to a degree? Sometimes you have to look at things in a full circle and wonder about that. But I would always lean on the accessibility as a strength, and it's great. The bigger we become here, and we've become a little bit more popular over the last few years being on Fox broadcast, the more fans are coming to sites, and we're selling out in one day. We don't have a lot of room in bowling centers. And the more that happens, the more you see, some dangers or some areas where we need to do a little bit better with our events in terms of separating the fans from the bowlers, so they don't think they can just come right down on the lanes, and so the bowlers can have a free walk to their locker room, and and if that doesn't exist, that can actually be a hindrance to our growth. So the bigger you become, the more problems you have, which is great. So we want more problems like that. I'll take a problem with too many fans every day.
I think I've been working in media, football media or soccer as you would call it, and while you were saying that question, while you were answering that question there, I was sort of thinking about the differences, and I day to day I might work with professional football players or managers or whatever, and I find a lot of what I sort of do or dictate is, they have to come through us, and we have to say yes or no, or it's dictated by the club what you can and can't do. Where I feel like with the PBA, it's all because it's very individual. You almost can be as involved or uninvolved as possible. I mean, you look at people like Verity, Brad and Kyle, Darren Tang, all these different people who are like posted loads of stuff on social media. They're making revenue streams themselves of it, growing the sport. But then you also might have players who maybe don't want all this media attention and don't really like having cameras in their face all the time, and they can just get on and bowl. And I think the fact that that is a thing means that the personalities that want to shine can shine, and the people who just want to get on and bowl can bowl. But ultimately, it's these personalities that are being allowed to sort of express themselves where that might not in other sports. So I think what the PBA does quite well is let people express themselves and sort of carry themselves how they want to carry themselves. And think of a Cal Troop or anyone like that who really carries the sport because of their personality, and because you allow them the freedom, that flourishes. And I think that really, really helps the viewing if people can fall in love with a bowler.
100%. That's really the most important thing. When your dad asked about, my job, I mean, I think that's really a big part of it, is to try to make as many people know the players and like them or dislike them as possible. Because when you know a player, as you guys know, then bowling is extremely exciting. When you care who wins because you know the person, or you think you do, or you like or dislike someone, it ends up being one of the most exciting sports you can watch, because there's so much luck involved and so many changes, and it's all about one person and what's going to happen. And it's usually very close, because the margin or the difference in margin of victory is always very, very close. So it becomes emotionally draining, and there's so much drama when you know the person. And so we do exactly what you're saying, and try to encourage the players to be themselves. And sometimes someone that's being themselves, you don't like them, and that's okay. That's what you don't have to have everybody as a robot and everyone's the same. I can love Pete Weber and you can hate Pete Weber, but both are fine. And just be Pete Weber. That's all we really ask for. And that usually works for people. And I think it does, like you said, it takes a little bit of the heat off of them. It's not like you go to every player and say, we need you to do this. We need you to do this. We don't do that at all. We just say, we want you to be yourself. And they'll see what generates fan support. And I think having fan support makes you bowl better, believe it or not. I think that it makes you more comfortable, and comfort and confidence are two of the biggest things about being a good bowler. So if you feel like you fit in and people like you, or people want to watch you, even if they don't like you, I think that puts you in a level of confidence that brings out the best in your game. So, yeah, no, you're very, very astute. I'm already trying to figure out how do we hire Ben and move him over here. I don't know. So,
I guess it's good to be, even if you're not liked, at least you're getting noticed, and to be not liked and get noticed is better than just not noticed at all. So there's an advantage.
There's guys I don't like on tour who I love, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, because it's marketable. Yeah, it makes sense. Now, coming back to what we were talking about earlier on with the spectators being so close to the top level bowlers in tournaments, etc. Do you think that the popularity of bowling has been affected by the limitations of bowling centres for spectators? I mean, Ben bowled at the SYC at South Point in Vegas, and that was great because it had grandstands there, and you could get a lot of people just watching. But a typical bowling center doesn't have that amount of space for people to be able to watch it live. It's not like a stadium where there's thousands of seats for people to watch the action. You don't get that in bowling. Do you think that is maybe something that's holding bowling back?
Well, it's certainly from a financial standpoint, it's a revenue stream, ticket sales that supports a lot of other sports and does not support pro bowling. So if you can have 50,000 people in a stadium or 10,000 people in a stadium and they're paying $50, $100 each and it's every game, you know, you have a revenue stream and a ability to reach people in a way that we do not. And so we've always had to be a TV sport for that purpose. Now, I will say that we've gone through periods of time where our ambition was to bring the PBA into arenas, build lanes in arenas, sell tickets to have more people there. There's still a certain limit to number of people that can kind of comfortably watch bowling even in an arena. And so if that number is in the 2 to 5,000 range, or even if it's high end 5,000, and it's not something we do regularly in the exact same place like a sports team would have their stadium, and when we're moving around, the expenses of putting special lanes in a way that's not permanent, that they'd be put in and then we have to take them down when we're done and go to the next place. The expenses versus the revenue makes it very difficult, but we've always wanted it. And I would love for bowling to grow to the point where, we've got to do the US Open at Madison Square Garden, or we've got to do it at Wembley Stadium, and because there's too many people that need to see this and need to see who's going to win this tournament, and they will pay money that will cover all of our costs and make it profitable. For sure, it's still a goal. When I write up dream sequences, that's where we are for the championship, is in a big arena. But for now, the reality is bowling centers, and yes, the limit for the number of fans makes it tough. It also makes it pretty cool. I mean, when you're part of it and it's an intimate setting and it's as loud as it can get in a bowling center. You guys have watched the PBA league stuff and like Bayside Bowl and where we do the championship of the league. I mean, that's as an electric and atmosphere as any sport I've ever been to. And I've been to the Super Bowl and the Kentucky Derby and the Masters golf tournament. I've been to all of them. And I've felt as much energy at some bowling events as any other pro sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you have that type of environment at we had it, should have said, the Weber Cup, where they took a center and then they built a couple of bowling lanes, and they had seating either side. So it can be done, but as you say, you have to get enough people interested to be able to turn a profit. But it's just coming back to what we're talking about TV coverage earlier on. I mean, obviously for TV coverage, commercial sponsorship is important, because to get those, to get commercial sponsorship to help with prize money, etc., the sponsors are going to want exposure. And do you think that commercial sponsors are interested in bowling and see bowling as a good way of being able to promote their business?
Well, they do, and we've had a lot of great partners through the years, but not as many and not as great as we'd want. One key is to try to teach them about the efficiency of the expense versus the return on the investment they would get with bowling. But there's also it's a very competitive market, and with so many sports on TV and so many big sports that are getting gigantic numbers for media rights from networks. So those networks need to make that money back, and they're selling extremely hard against the media rights that they're paying for basketball and American football and baseball, and so it's so competitive. I think what we need to do is I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but uh, the challenge. Oh yeah, what I was going to get to is the challenge with with our shows when they're on is they get a very solid rating for the niche sport that we are. And we have sometimes 1 million people watching at any one time, and for the entire year, 20 million or so watching us on television. Um, but the demographics of that audience can skew a little bit older than what we would want because because of bowling's height back in the day, and those are the people that hung on as fans. And at some point or other, 30 years ago, whatever it was, we weren't cultivating new audiences as well. And so, or because of the competition, the excitement level of the PBA possibly isn't at a point where a kid like Ben and his friends want to watch it versus a more action sport or fighting or like UFC or things like that.
Mhm.
So we battle that, and our audience ends up being a little bit older. And for the most part, sponsors, uh, media rights organizations, networks, they want younger. They always want younger. Everybody wants younger viewers, younger demos, and that's been a classic kind of hurdle for bowling to get over. And we've done a lot of things through the years to make sure we still are cultivating the youth and bringing more people up. And some of it's paying off now, and our ratings have gone up the last few years, every year, and the numbers for our younger demos, which is like an 18 to 49 group, have gone up every year. So, but it's not something I don't think that's going to happen overnight. So we fight that battle every day too. You want to maintain your old audience, which are people like me. I'm 55, so you want to maintain them and not take away their you know uh, love of the game. But at the same time, you have to come up with new things to excite next generations and get them involved.
Yeah. Um, I think you mentioned sort of pushing towards the younger generation, and I mean, this could just be me being naive here, but especially in the past season or two, I've seen a lot more on social media. I mean, you must have hired some sort of social media team, but I've seen a lot more coverage on social media, and I can see what you're trying to do, where you're trying to push the sort of you're trying to push across the boulders to you to try and get you emotionally invested, and I think that's really good. But that's just one of the examples of the changes that you've done, and I think if I'm correct in saying here, you're about to go into your 13th year, or you're in your 13th year as commissioner of the PBA. I'm interested what sort of changes that stand out to you that you made, and sort of what are your most proud changes that you managed to make for the PBA.
Well, you're right that our social media has really improved recently. It's been great, and we're starting to interact a lot more. I think one thing I'm proud of is the players themselves. Like you mentioned, a bunch of them starting their YouTube channels, and that's getting kids involved, where they're following these people on and off the lanes. And now, when a good example is my son is he's 21 now, but when he was getting into bowling and he was watching like the house videos on YouTube, and and then Packy took that channel over, and Packy's on there every week with videos. And my son never met Packy Hanrahan, but when Packy finally won his first tournament, um, I looked at my son. We were watching it on the computer. It was on Bull TV, and he had tears in his eyes. I mean, so to him, he knows Packy Hanrahan. He knows how much it meant to him to win that title, and so it hit him right here. And he was just a kid. He's only 19 years old, or 20 years old at the most, and it's hitting him because of those channels and what they've done. So all those guys, Darren Tang, Brad and Kyle, Belmo's getting into it now, and more are doing it. I'm proud of that. Some of the things that we did that were big picture to try to bring new audiences in and younger audiences in were things like the Chris Paul celebrity event. And we'd have big stars from other sports and entertainment bowling with PBA bowlers, respecting PBA bowlers, loving the game of bowling, really propping up the PBA bowlers. And I'd partner them with Chris Paul and his friends, And that was those demographics on those shows were always younger than the typical shows. And so hopefully what you're doing with shows like that is grabbing some people that never would have watched bowling, and then hopefully they come back next week to watch the pros bowl. So that's one of the things. I think that creative programming or trying to reach younger audiences is so tricky, because for every example of something you would do, there's an example in another sport that's the opposite, or there's something another sport will do, and then you do it and it doesn't work for you, but it worked for them. And like people might say you need a young announcer, and then you watch a sport that has the greatest young demos and it's got the oldest announcer. So that doesn't make sense. So you're always just trying things. I don't think there's a magic bullet. I think PBA Junior is a huge step. The more we can connect the kids to the big game, and but I think the Chris Paul was probably the thing that I'm most proud of that I did there. The World Series of Bowling was also the other thing that I'm probably most proud of starting, and that got people to understand that the game was international and that there's great players from all over the world. And so bowling's maybe not what you think it is. It's a global sport. And then I think we've alluded to it a couple times, but the PBA Elite League, being able to watch the best players in the world team up and communicate and celebrate together and bowl as a team, I think has brought a younger audience in who kind of looks at it as theirs, because the PBA since 1958 was always just individual sport, individual bowling every week, like golf, individual every week. And for, until we started the league in 2013. So from 1958 to 2013, really almost no team bowling. And then to start a league and to have all those best players on teams going at it on television and in person. Now this is my PBA. I want to, if there's a lot of kids out there, probably you too, that say to themselves, I want to be on one of those teams. And most kids I didn't have that aspiration when I was your age, because there was no PBA league. So I think that is another area where we've grown in trying to reach that next generation.
Do you think there's any pressure to make changes to the game to increase the popularity with a younger audience? For instance, in different sports, they do make changes. Like I followed F1 for many years, and then at one time there was no fueling in F1, and they made a compulsory pit stop to fuel and change tires. Then they do various things that sort of changes the race that is designed to make it more exciting. Is there any pressure to, whilst trying to maintain the basics of the game, to make some sort of a change to the way the game is played, or a format to try and attract that younger audience?
Well, the way the game is played, that happened during my tenure. I mean, one of the big things I did when I first got the job was know who Jason Belmonte was, and know that he was as good as players on the PBA tour, but that he wasn't on the PBA tour, and know that this two-handed style would really make people's eyes open up if he was on the PBA tour. It wouldn't have mattered if he wasn't. And so getting him to join the PBA and getting him to come out and be on tour was a big accomplishment. And of course, all credit to him for having the guts to do it. And he did it. And then he started an entire movement based on a different way to play the game. So that's one example of what you're talking about with the game. And then the second example you just gave was not just the game, the way it was played, but what did you say?
Maybe about the format of
Yes, formats. Yeah. So we've tried quicker stuff. We've tried, even in recent years, there was a format that was being used in a youth event, and I kind of liked it and took it to the PBA, and it was, you got to win 2 games, and if you split the games, it's a 9th and 10th roll off, and And the idea there was it's going to be exciting. If we get to that 9th and 10th, there's going to be so much pressure and it's quick. A purist might not like it because you want to bowl more games and the cream rises, but an audience wants to watch it now and fast and exciting. And, I even invented a format called the Clash, where we put everybody together and the low ball is out and go all the way down until there's only one person standing at the end. And those types of formats or the strike derby that we created a couple years ago, a few years ago now, you get 2 minutes and you can get as many strikes as you can and the winner wins. I mean, those are the types of things we're trying to do from a format standpoint. But we don't want to steal from the tradition of winning the U.S. Open, winning the Tournament of Champions, winning the World Championship, the Players Championship. Those are all still classic, thorough tests for players. But at the same time, we throw out all of these new ideas that maybe, the good side of that is we're testing them and they might be really exciting and people might really be glued to watching bowling on TV. The bad side is it could maybe get confusing for a viewer who just wants the same thing every single time. And I understand that too. If I'm going to go check out a new sport and you're going to turn the page on me every time it's on and I got to figure it out each time, that's difficult. So you have to pay attention to tradition, but you're trying not to let it hold you back from testing and trying new things. But it's been plenty new. I mean, and the other things I've done in my 10 years, I've tried to color the oil. I got tired of everybody saying it's invisible and you can't. Well, let's put color on it. Well, let's show an image of the oil pattern on the lane if we can do that. Another thing that came about finally because of our deal with Fox it was putting Specto into the game and having strike track and being able to see every shot and how precise these players are and give their ball speeds and where they are at the arrows, where they are at the break point. And so it's kind of entertaining, but at the same time going deeper into the geeking out on bowling as a sport and all the different elements of how you have to be good. So I've kind of been proud of all of it. Now, have we reached where I wish we could be? And not yet, but we certainly have tried.
Yeah. So you obviously mentioned, the big task of getting Jason to the PBA. Are you able to sort of tell us a bit about how that process sort of worked out? Because
Well, I love it. I love it because I met him. He was bowling big events all over the world, and so he would come to the U.S. and he bowled the Masters, and that's the first time I saw him. That's just an open field event, and he was kind of a rumor, and someone told me to go check it out and go watch this kid, and this was about 2006 or so, and I watched when I was with the USBC, and we ran the Masters, and I watched him and realized, okay, if he made it big on the PBA tour, it would change the game, and it would not be boring. And he's throwing pins around like I've never seen before. And the loudest strike in the building was his. And why isn't he on the PBA? So I set up a meeting with him and talked to him. And I, what's funny is this poster right behind me was in my office, and we were looking at the 25 greatest players in PBA history. It's funny that this is there and this is the same story, but I really said to him in the meeting, and he was probably 21 years old. And if the only way you're going to get on this poster as one of the greats in the history of the game is if you bowl the PBA tour. And then I kind of just followed him for the next year or so, and I saw him again at the World Championship in Thailand. I think that was the order of things, but and then I went to the PBA after that and realized, okay, now I'm with the PBA, and this young man, Jason Belmonte, and the other group of like Martin Larson was part of that group, the other group of international players, Dom, that I had noticed are as good as players on the PBA tour. We need to get them over here. And so we came up with ways to do it. And then I had invited Belmo to come to a special TV show that we were doing at a theme park. It was called Six Flags. It's like a water park. And we set up lanes there and did a special event. And I invited him to be on the show on as one of the players. And that upset a lot of the PBA tour players. because instead of inviting one of them, I invited this kid who wasn't even in the PBA. But I knew if we could get him there. So then we got him there, and he was bowling on TV, and I went to lunch with him. And the person I brought to lunch with him was Carmen Salvino, who started the PBA tour. He's 90 years old now, and he's a legend. He's got a great personality. He's one of the most fun players to ever watch in the history of the PBA. He helped start the PBA and was a big TV star before the PBA in the 50s. And Carmen, told Belmo right there, this is why you got to join the PBA. And he gave him the reasons and said what it would mean for him and for his family. And so Belmo went home after that. And then I still kept talking to him. When are you going to come over? And it was tough because we had those PTQs back then at the time. And the only way he could make it in would be if he came and bowled a PTQ. So we're asking someone to fly from Australia and bowl 7 games and beat 80 guys to make it into the field. And I wouldn't blame somebody for saying, I can't do that. I mean, that's too risky, too expensive, and not a fair enough test for me to do that. And so I actually gave him an exemption where he wouldn't have to bowl the PTQ. Come, we'll put you right in the field. Again, upset many PBA tour players by doing that. But I really thought in the long run it would pay off for them, and it would pay off for the whole sport if we get him involved. And he came over and did that, and he got the bug and he didn't do well. He came in like last place. I mean, he was near the bottom in this first tournament that he bowled. But I knew the competitor. You could tell the competitor he is, the focus he is, the way he's able to handle a limelight, the pride he has in his own skills and what he has done. And so he wasn't going to stop at finishing near the bottom in a PBA event. So he started bowling them all. And then he won that year. And then he became part of the legend, and he's broken all the records pretty much. So it really, but it was an effort, and it's understanding what's important to make a sport go. You got to have great players, and they got to be the types of people that can inspire. And if they're out there and they're not part of your league or your tour, then you got to get on it and make that happen.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, you mentioned that you're trying to expand internationally, and Jason came internationally. So for people that are maybe in whatever country around the world that are looking at joining the PBA, what would you kind of advise as their route to get to the PBA? I mean, I know obviously you got PTQs and stuff like that, and it seems pretty complicated. But how, if we asked you what's your route to the PBA if you're outside the US?
Yeah, I think the best event for the first route is to dominate where you are. I mean, you can't not be the best where you are and then think you're going to come here and be a star on the PBA tour. So wherever you are and whatever you have to compete in, and in some countries it's only world bowling type of events where you're going to face some US players and Swedish players and players that are really established. That's where you're going to gauge if it's worth it, if it's something that you could possibly come do, or you're going to learn what you have to work on to get to that level. So you got to dominate there first. And then, there's a couple open field type events in the PBA that are on the national tour. If you were local, if you were in the US, I would tell you to start in our regional program. And our regional program is like the minor leagues of bowling, and you don't have to fly to get to the tournaments, and they're not that expensive to enter, and they're people from around you, but you get a taste of what it's like in the PBA. And if you do well, you can make it on the national. But for an international player, you got to dominate at home, and then you could come over and bowl the Masters as an open field event that'll give you a taste of what's it going to take. And if you do well, you could establish yourself quickly. And the World Series of bowling. And lately, the way we've been doing the World Series is having we're saving 20 spots in the event, and having international players send resumes for what they have accomplished, and then trying to get the best possible people in the World Series. I think next year we're actually going to try to open the World Series up a little bit more, so that because I got too many resumes this year. Felt terrible about having to say no to people. So we want more international players to have a chance there. And the reason why it's better to come to the World Series than what Belmo had to do back in the day to come over and bowl one PTQ is at the World Series, you're in a tournament and there's at least 4 and sometimes more events in one location. So it's not just 1 7 game and you're done. It's you're in the World Championship and you're bowling in, for example, the cheetah and the scorpion and the viper, and so you get to a different look every day. The shark, and you get a different experience on PBA patterns against PBA players, which makes a big difference, believe me. And you have more opportunities with one trip, one expense, and that's why I would encourage the World Series for you if you're dominating in your home country. If you're the 50th best, then you're going to come over. Then it's just going to be only an experience. You're not going to be able to compete. So those would probably be the best ways. And then in the U.S. and possibly probably even more so for international players, because most of the ball companies and other companies that make things like shoes, for bowlers or jerseys are based in the U.S., but they want to grow internationally. So if I'm Storm and I want to reach more players in the UK, then maybe I want to give Ben a call and say, I want you wearing Storm. And when you're doing well, the people around you will want to buy Storm equipment. And having that kind of a contract can be another way to get to the US and get in PBA Tour events, because those companies will help you with advice, with the equipment that you need. So there's like 2 ways to go. One is just to bowl for it, and the other way is to do well where you are and make sure everybody's aware of it by any means necessary to be able to get the kind of support you need to come over.
Yes. So for the future, do you think at some point we're likely to see a PBA event in the UK?
I would love it. Like I said, I always love watching the Weber Cup, so I know there's people there that would have fun. And Dom and Stu and Verity, are 3 of our best promoters of bowling for all different reasons, but they're people that everybody here likes. Everybody in the U.S. loves Dom, and everybody. Stu's one where you can not like, but you don't, but you know him, and Stu. And he essentially one of the more likable. And then Verity has done a great job promoting herself, and everybody here roots for her to make a show on the PWBA. And we've invited her to be in PBA events several times. So there's plenty of reasons, to come and do an event. We would just need to talk about the bowling center and which place would want us there, and how can we afford. Everything comes down to business. So how do we afford it? And basically, if any area wants the PBA, they'll get the PBA, but there might be a cost associated with it to make sure we get the best people.
Okay. Well, I think you have one final question.
So I think we'll go 2 questions actually. The first one is, what's next for you? What's next for PBA?
Well, we just came off this season, which was pretty exhilarating, and we had 5 different guys, win major championships on broadcast television here, $100,000 checks for each one of them. And it was pretty exciting, unpredictable season, and ending with the playoffs. Like you mentioned, Boog, no one would have predicted that before the season. And here we got this guy and he wins the PBA playoffs to finish our main part of our season. But now we still have the tour finals, which is on CBS Sports Network in the U.S., with the top 8 players from the last 2 years going at it for 2 straight days of live television here. You'll end up seeing it on YouTube, I'm sure, if you can't get it there. And then hopefully Bowl TV can put it on. I'll make sure about that. But it's a fun one to watch for 2 days unfold. And then the PBA League playoffs is still to come this fall at Bayside Bowl. So we bowled all year this year with a full schedule of 14 rounds of matches, and got to the top 6 teams. They're in the bracket, and they're going to bowl all those matches on TV on Fox Sports in September from Portland. So that's coming up. But for the rest of the year, and of course the PBA has always got something going on. The senior tour, the regional tour, the RPI, which takes the best regional players and they get to go somewhere. So we're following all those things all year. But for the most part, we're just getting ready. We'll start getting ready for the 2025 PBA on Fox season. And how can we continue to make it, even better? And talking to people like you is one way to help make it better, and having you talk to people about it. Because ultimately it comes down to you need as many people watching as possible. And that's how you drive up your value. And if one of the goals is higher prize money and more attention, then you have to have money. And for the most part in pro sports, money comes from television rights, and television rights comes from networks that need you and want you so they can make money. And that comes down to basically what we need to do. So when we'll work with Fox as well, they're really great. We can talk to them. How can we make the shows better? What can we do? And we'll listen. There's no egos involved. There's no, well, we can't do that. We don't do that. We'll do anything it takes to put bowling where it should be, and have people like you like this.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So obviously the final question is, we're trying get the best guests we can possibly get, and I think a big way for doing that's through networking, because as much as you can message someone on Instagram, especially people like Belmo, you might not always be able to get to them through a DM, but you can get to them through other people. So we're trying to, we're asking every guest now, who would you recommend to come on the SpareTime podcast, and could you help make it happen? So we're wondering who you'd recommend to come on the podcast next.
Have you had Belmo?
Nah, tried.
Do you want Belmo?
Obviously.
Okay, well, I'll try with that one for you. I think you'll have him. I think you'll have him. We'll make a few contacts there. But I think you should start with your own list first. Like who do you want? Who's your top 5?
My list of top 5. That's hard. I've never been asked it. I think straight away, it's got to be Parker Bone. His humor's next level. It surprised me. I think EJ and Simo, the seasons that they've had recently has been mental. I think talking of Oscar, maybe. Pete Weber, I think, is the only one you can top it off of, really, isn't it? So,
well, that's a good list. I'll do my best to help. Parker is interesting now because his sons are going to be the next generation of the PBA Tour. They're both superstars in the making, so he'll be around for a long time. EJ would definitely be a great guest, and I think he's the kind of. Are you a one-handed bowler or two?
I was one-handed, but literally just went to
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, EJ is probably the most talent you've ever seen for sure, and probably ever. I think that he's a generational talent, and he's one-handed, so that helps me. When everyone says that everything's gone two-handed, I can say, well, what about EJ? He's winning everything. He's one-handed, And actually, there's plenty. Bill O'Neill is the classic bowler, and he had a fantastic year. And Dom, there's plenty. Chris Prather and AJ Johnson and Andrew Anderson. There's so many one-handers that can still compete at the highest level, but certainly it's growing with the two-handers. Guys like Simo and Pete Weber, you never know what you're going to get there. I love them both, but Simo might never do anything I tell him to do. But if he did it, then it might be great. Pete might do exactly what I tell him to do, but then you get him and you might not like it. So he's really an interesting guy. And it's been weird for me to grow up. And when I was your age, how old are you, Ben?
16.
16. Yeah, when I was probably 14, Pete Weber was about 18. And he had already joined the PBA and was already a star because he was EJ Tackett back then, gifted, generational, inventing the way people would throw the ball for years. And And so I was a fan of his when I was 14 years old, 15, 16, 17, all the way up. I was a fan. And then to kind of be, in charge of him and talking to him, it's pretty surreal situation to have that. But Parker, for sure, we're going to get for you. I'm going to get you Belmo, whether you want him or not. And EJ Osku's also, he's about the nicest guy that you could ever meet. And, he was actually the first two-hander that was on a PBA show. You ever watch that one? The U.S. Open. Go back on YouTube and watch U.S. Open Osku, and he was a young kid, and everybody was like, what is he doing? This is crazy. He's throwing it with two hands, and he had so much power and strength. I mean, that guy, I always, whenever I see Oscar, I go like this. I'm not shaking his hand because his hand is so strong. He just gives you a basic handshake and it breaks every bone in your hand. He is a rock. He is so strong, Oscar. I'm telling you. And it's funny that the two-handers, everyone used to say when Belmo started, when these guys get older, they're going to have injuries. You can't bowl that way. And everybody said that. And I don't think a two-hander's ever had an injury, and every one-hander ends up their knee ends up bothering them, or their arm, or something ends up hurting on a one-hander, and nothing's ever happened to a two-hander. So I think those people were wrong. Osku got injured, but it was because he threw one-handed at spares. And if you remember how Osku throws at the 10-pin, he throws it the fastest I've ever seen a person throw a ball. I mean, and I think he was throwing it too hard, and he hurt his arm. So Osku was a two-hander with an injury, but he got the injury because of one-handed. So it wasn't the two. It's you can't predict anything. Everything happens crazy. But I'll work on those guys for you because you're a great interviewer and got a really good future. And just having the guts to write me and say, hey, would you want to do this? Believe me, you're ahead of a lot of people by doing that. I wouldn't have had the guts when I was a kid to do it. I would have thought, I can't reach this person. I can't do it.
Damn.
There you go. You did it.
It's been fantastic. I mean, we've been live now for about an hour and 11 minutes. And, I could sit here for another an hour and 11 minutes asking you more and more questions because there's just so many things that we want to know. But we don't want to take up too much of your time, but we really do appreciate you taking the time out to speak to us today. It's been interesting. We've learned a lot, and we hope that people who's watching this has as well, Tom. So we really do appreciate the time.
Thanks to you guys. Maybe we'll come back on and when the new season's about to start, or maybe before the PBA League, and we can talk about that specifically and who you guys think's going to win. One thing that I've been really happy with here is that you can bet on sports more freely here now, like you always could in England, and now that you can do it more freely, and bowling is on there, I think it's going to make another group of people interested in watching and getting involved with the game and being able to wager on it. So people that know the game and can talk about it will help educate them, and you'll become more and more valuable. I mean, that's what I'm really, really hoping. And I just saw at the casino yesterday that the PBA League futures were already up on the board, and you can already bet on it. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, betting is a scandal. Betting is a whole new subject, and we could talk about it maybe on the next podcast that you come on. Absolutely. And we can maybe talk about that because it's an interesting development in bowling. I think that is. But
sure.
But thank you, Tom. And if you've liked watching this SpareTime podcast today, sponsored by ADR Wear, if you like and subscribe to the channel, we try to put a podcast out every now and again. We try to get as many interesting guests as possible, and I think Tom has proved that today. We thank you for watching. Thank you to Tom, and me and Ben will both see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Awesome.